Welcome back to the Rural Roundup. This show is produced in association with the Scottish Government. Mary Jane, how are things with you?
Good, thanks, George. Yeah, we've got a rare day of sunshine today here in the Lothians. I think, like most of Scotland, we've been fairly battered by wind and rain over the last month since we last chatted, and the forecast looking a little bit tricky for the coming week as well, with Storm Dave, I think it's called, supposedly arriving this Easter weekend. So yeah, it's been all right conditions, I think, for folk that are doing slightly earlier lambings, but those in the hill ground that are starting to lamb in the next couple of weeks will be watching the forecast closely to see what's happening. But it's certainly nice to see a bit of sun out there today. Lots of farmers in our area in the fortunate position of having finished their spring barley sowing, and those that are still plodding on. Hopefully, the sort of sun and a bit of wind today is helping dry up some of the torrential rain that we had last night. But yeah, it's been a cold and wet start to the year for sure. How's things in the northeast?
Things are really transforming. Really, amazing difference just in the last month. We have dry weather. Everything's dried up really, really quick. To the point that there are some areas that are now quite concerned. Ironically, just because it dried up so quickly. There's been a lot of barley been sown the last fortnight. The first of it is now starting to peep through the ground. The soil's still a bit on the cold side, to be honest, but it's dry, and people are really cracking on. The winter crops are coming away now. Oilseed rape is jumping, just as it tends to do once it gets a bit of sun and it starts accessing its nitrogen. So it's really starting to jump up, and in a short while the countryside will start turning yellow. So yeah, things are moving on apace. You think back to what it was like a couple of months ago, and you thought, well, there's no way people would be so far on as at the beginning of April, and people were sowing around about the same date as they started last year, and we regarded it as quite early. So it's funny how things can turn out. We did have rain last night. It was enough to stop people this morning, but the sun's out again, and there's a puff of wind again, and folk will be going again.
Yeah, the other challenging thing we've had is the amount of wind we've had recently for spraying and spreading fertiliser. And I know at home we've been struggling to get on and get the spraying done just because the amount of wind that we've been having. So in the days where it has been dry enough, it's been quite windy. So we're hopeful that once this storm passes this weekend, things will clear up and we'll allow to get on with spraying and spreading fertiliser hopefully next week, but we shall see.
I think we would say that up here that we have it has been windier than normal. There's no doubt about that. Some days it's been really, really windy, but it's been dry, and now we're getting the sun shining as well. It's a lot better than it was when it was raining. There's only really been one day. It was Tuesday. It was a nice spring day. Every other day it's had a wee bit of a chill in it. So we'd like the temperatures a wee bit higher.
Yeah, and I think for most people, calving and sort of those that are lambing a bit earlier have been getting on relatively well. At home, we're about halfway through now, so we're just over 50 cows calved, another 50 odd to go. So things are going well. But yeah, like everyone, a bit of warmth and a bit of sun to get the grass growing, and we'll hopefully start turning cows out in the next few weeks if things dry up enough for us. But of course, the biggest topic at the moment is IACS, and we're all flat out doing our basic payment claims. How have things been going in your office, George?
The first week, so that would have been just after the middle of March, we had a really good start. We had a lot of people quite keen to come in, get it out of the way, so that was fine. This week it really has tailed off. People are busy outside, catching up, ploughing or sowing or what have you. But we had a great start, and now it's just tailed off. We know it'll be busy soon again. It's the new enhanced greening. People are, I would say, embracing it. That's the best way to say it. We're seeing, there's a lot of different options. Folk are working with the flexibility that it offers. some people are using some of the new options. Some people are using them as part of their obligations. There's, I had quite a lot of conversations about the, low input grassland, people looking at herbal lays. So there's, during that time, there's been quite a lot of conversations, what seed mixes to use and things like that. And the green cover, the increased flexibility there. If it's going to be an early harvest, and perhaps up here there is a potential to put in fodder crops. If it's going to be a later harvest, then you maybe need to look at some of the other species. So there's been a lot of good conversations, people being quite open to it. So it's pretty positive, really. There is more flexibility, perhaps, maybe there has been in previous years.
Yeah, I think we unfortunately are still seeing a few people coming in that aren't quite sure what they're doing for greening, and those tend to be the people that are having to do it for the first time. And generally, obviously, mixed livestock arable farms where they maybe have a few fields of spring barley that rotate round, and that's what's causing the issue, because they've then got the temporary grass following it for a few years. But we are finding the low input grassland is a great option for them, because generally these farms will have maybe even several fields where they're happy to do the low input grassland option, which is helping us, as well as, same as you, the sort of forage crop options are helping people green cover. And yeah, I was chatting to a seed merchant earlier in the week about all the different seed mixes, and they're a great help. So if in any doubt, phone up your Dodds of Addington, your the Castle seed mixes, and Watson Seeds. All these guys will have they know what the rules are, they know what the seed mixes need to be, and they'll know what suits your area as well. So that's important.
Yes, that's right. If you're, because some of these mixes, by the sounds of it, are not cheap, and it's important to make sure that if you are taking the time to sow these mixes, whether it's a fallow mix, whether it's a herbal lay or something else, it actually is going to grow. It's suited to your farm, it's suited to your area. You're investing in it, basically. So yeah, you want it to do as well as possible. You want the species to grow.
Interesting chatting to him about the sort of floristically enhanced grass margins. Now if you're establishing a new grass margin, field margin, you need to consider sowing it with one of the sort of species mixes for floristically enhanced flowering species. And he was just saying, how we forget how fertile our soil can be, and some of these species mixes prefer more infertile soil. And whilst you might think, oh, that mix will look lovely, it'll look really good and great for pollinators, he was saying within a year or two you'll really be struggling to see what you've sown. So he's just saying, thinking about the longevity of some of the mixes that you put in as well for the likes of field margins that you might hope will flower for many years to come, just thinking about what suits your farm. And if you've got a particularly productive arable farm that's been having fertiliser for years, then some of the mixes will need to take that into account. So worth chatting to a seed merchant as well if you're unsure what to sow.
Yeah. You won't be able, you'll just like what we are up here. Every IACS conversation, people are speaking about fuel prices, fertiliser prices, fertiliser availability, because of events that are going on elsewhere in the world. There's no doubt that it couldn't come really at a worse time for farmers, with a busy time, a lot of land work going on. It's going to put, I suppose, certainly from an arable point of view, it was challenging enough, and this is really going to make it much, much harder in terms of profitability this year.
Yeah, I think it's just a sort of another kick while you're down, isn't it? When grain prices are not looking too good for the coming harvest, and if you've not bought your fertiliser or you've ordered it and not paid yet, some of the prices are looking up to £100 a tonne more since even just a month or so ago, and same for fuel for a lot of farmers. We've been hearing almost doubling of red diesel prices. We've been hearing up to 130 pence a litre, which is eye-watering really compared to what we were paying even just a month ago. So very difficult for people to do anything but order it. If your tank's empty, and you need to order it at the current price. We've also heard that there's could be delays on delivery as well. So just you might want to hedge your bets and think, oh, I've got however many thousand litres left. Should I wait another month and order it? But if it's a 3-week or 4-week lag, I know some people will be nervous about doing that in case they run out at a crucial time.
I think prices fluctuating as well. I've heard folk being told, oh, if you wait another day, it might drop quite significantly. And I think a lot depends on, what the current situation is. The market's fluctuating. It's definitely worth keeping an eye on those prices. And if you think there's a bit of a dip, the price, it's still not going to be great, but it's maybe better than it could have been. And it's maybe just a chance to get a top up or something. It's just try and keep your ear out for better prices and trying to take advantage of that rather than leave it till the last minute and then be really at the mercy of the market.
Yeah, I think we were in this position when the Ukraine conflict kicked off as well a few years ago, that fertilizer prices suddenly jumped, up to double what they had been. And I think when there's such a huge increase in price, it's always an opportunity to look at what you're doing on your farm, and just brings it into sharp focus that you take for granted that you use fuel every day. But when it's suddenly double the price, it just makes you think, right, okay, what can I do to cut that back? And just before we had this conversation, I had a quick look on the FAS website. We have quite a lot of resources on there through the Farming for a Better Climate programme that we used to run. There's some great downloads from some of the focus farms that there were. And there's also some useful sort of technical notes and fact sheets. I found a good one called Small Measures Can Make Big Fuel Savings. And it's just, a lot of it's basic, and you might read it through it thinking, we're taking it back to basics with, maintain your tractor, ensure tire pressures. But if you think about all these things collectively, you could be saving 5-10% of the amount of fuel that you're using, which could make a big difference to the bottom line. And just thinking about number of passes that you're doing, and particularly when the weather's tricky at the moment, if ground is wet and you're going on because you're desperate to get going, just think about the impact that that's going to have on the fuel that you're using, but also the compaction that you might be creating, which then has a knock-on effect for any cultivations later on in the year.
Yeah, it is. I had an old university lecturer, and he used to be very fond of the phrase "many amico max a muckle," and it's these things. If you make little savings here and there, they add up. And it's just a bit more awareness, best practice, whether it's pressures, whether it's, shopping around, it just matching the right machine for the job, stuff like that. It's common sense / good practice, really. And if it saves you a few pounds along the way, then, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, taking a bit of time just to ensure that everything's maintained and, serviced can make sure that the engine's functioning at full capacity rather than, struggling to cope with dust or, things that need oiled and greased and just not working as efficiently as they should be. And, whilst it's busy on the farm, it's worth taking the time to do some maintenance jobs. I think again with fertilizer, with the prices of fertilizer at the moment creeping up as well, availability, people might be worried about what they're needing being available. So it's always worth doing a bit of a nutrient budget review as well. If you've not spread fertilizer yet, have a think about, is there anywhere that you could maybe cut back or reduce this year, making sure that you're making the most of your mucks and slurries and manures that you've got on the farm.
And Mary Jane, there's a few grants on the go at the moment. We'll talk about AECS in a wee minute. First off, Food Processing, Marketing and Cooperation Grant.
Yeah, so that's currently open at the moment, and it closes the same date as IACS, so 15th of May. And it's for covering up to 40% of the project costs to businesses within the Scottish food and drink sector. It's designed for sort of capital investments, and it could be useful for any sort of diversified businesses. Some of the eligible costs that people might want to consider is sort of equipment, so machinery used to add value to agricultural products, processing equipment for the food and drink market, And it says here this includes transforming, preparing, fermenting, refining, preserving, stabilizing, maturing, conditioning. So any sort of processing to food products to add value, that's all covered under the equipment side of things. And it also includes buildings and fixed infrastructure. So refurbishing buildings or constructing or extending any buildings on the farm for food and drink processing use. So that's quite a useful thing for a lot of businesses that might be looking to expand or start up for the first time. There's a sort of list of ineligible costs. So it's any sort of primary production costs, processing into a non-food or drink product. So that's not covered. Retail and hospitality isn't covered, and transport and distribution or anything like routine maintenance or repairs are also not covered. But there's some examples available online that you can go and have a look at, and it's all the guidance is available online as well. So it's worth checking that out if you've got a food and drink business or looking to go into that area.
Yeah, I think that's. I think we see more and more people now looking at something else, I think, to add to the farm business, and I think it's certainly worth a look at. There is a wee window there still to go for it, and certainly it's an opportunity just to consider something else for the business, something that diversification that it just gives another income stream.
Yeah, absolutely. And another grant that's hopefully coming back in a couple of months is the Future Farm Investment Scheme as well. So that's another one to keep an eye out for as well. Hopefully being announced sort of Highland Show time again this year.
Yeah. Yep, I'm sure everybody will keep their eyes out for that one. Also on the go, and I'm sure you'll be getting a few inquiries about it just now, AECS, the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme, which has been on the go a long time. I think was it 2015 it first came on the go. So most people are quite aware of it. It's running again this spring.
Yeah, I think it has been on the go for a long time, but it is more attractive to people, I think, this year. For the last 2 rounds of the Agri-Environment Scheme, it's an annual scheme, so you can apply annually, and the closing date is sometime in June. You then get a decision later on this year to start January 2027. So it is sort of quite a long, drawn-out process of when you're going to start, but then from 1st of January 2027, it lasts for 5 years from that point. It's the last 2 rounds, the pass mark was really low, so it is much more attractive to people because for a while there it was very, very competitive and hard to get into. But a lot of businesses have, they've done their 5 years and decided not to renew, or those that had done the 5 years have renewed again. So there is still funding available for it, and I think it is an attractive one to go for at the moment because, the pass mark has been lowered, and so you've got a greater chance of success, fewer other businesses to compete against, potentially.
I think we're seeing more interest because the arable sector has prospects aren't so good for this foreseeable future for the next few years. And quite a lot of people are finding that their malt and barley contracts, something they've been relying on, is something that hasn't really been too difficult to get hold of. They've been scaled back quite dramatically, so they haven't got the same market for their product or the premium market for their product. Again, it's looking for something else. It's another income stream. It's a steady income. It enhances the environment of your farm. There's no doubt about that. And you can use some of these, one of the common options up here, stubble followed by green manures. It allows you to put in a green cover, which can really do a lot for your soil, whether it's, soil conditioning or helping the soil structure, building up residual fertility, as well as doing something for pollinators and such like. So it's a particularly common one up here. Mary Jane, you're doing more, I would say, more environmental things than what I am. With your biodiversity hat on, what's some of the real benefits of some of the options?
I think the winter stubbles followed by green manures is one of the best ones for arable farmers, certainly, for all the reasons you've just listed there. You can have up to 30 hectares if you've got over 500 hectares of your farm. Most commonly farms will be probably smaller than that, so it goes up incrementally. You can have 10 hectares, 20 hectares, or 30 hectares, and it's a rotational option. So you move it around your farm over the 5 years, and that just moves the benefit. So from a sort of arable point of view, it obviously benefits soil health and, as you're saying, improving soil structure. And as we're just talking about fertiliser and fuel there, once that's established, you obviously then don't need to apply any fertiliser. You don't need to touch it again for the rest of the summer. And then when you come to cultivate it in the autumn to go into whatever crop you want to follow it, you're bound to see some benefit from the improvement in soil structure and some nutrient benefits there. But with the biodiversity hat on, it's obviously got a huge benefit for pollinators. Some of the Phacelia crops that you see around these huge blue fields that look quite striking in the countryside, absolutely alive with insects and pollinators. So that's a great option. And as I say, allows you to do quite a hefty chunk of land, 20 hectares on a farm, 250 to 500 hectares. That's like, for some farms, that might be two fields a year. Yeah, two fields a year into that option. And if it rotates it round, that really moves the benefit round the farm. In terms of other arable options that complement that quite nicely, the wild bird seed is another good one. And again, you can rotate that round. So you could, maybe do 5 hectares of wild bird seed and move that round the farm. So some people in the past would choose to have, a wetter corner somewhere and we'll stick that down in wild bird seed. It never grows very well as a arable crop. So we'll stick some wild bird seed in there. And the trouble with that is the wild bird seed then itself never does very well either, because that part of the field doesn't grow for whatever reason. So if you want to look at it with a soil conditioning point of view, that you maybe put some deeper rooting crops in or some different crops that you wouldn't normally put in, move that crop around your farm, the wild bird seed around the farm on rotation, and you'll be seeing some benefit from that as well. And obviously, the better it grows, the more seed it's going to provide for seed-eating birds over the winter, which is its primary function, is to provide a winter seed source, but it also can have flowering species in it that benefit pollinators as well. So that's a nice one to sort of complement the winter stubbles followed by green manures. Other options are the sort of grass margins and things, and I do think we're seeing less of them since greening became compulsory for everyone with arable ground, because generally people that had margins established under the old SRDP or earlier EECS are now using them for their EFA greening option. So I do think we're seeing less of them managed for EECS. I'm not saying they're not there anymore, because they are. They're still being used for EFA, but it's less likely that people will want to use that option, because most field boundaries that that have a margin will be used for greening rather than EECS. Mm-hmm. And from a sort of grassland farm point of view, there's lots of good options for wading birds and things. Species-rich grassland, if you have that already, you can do management of species-rich grassland, or you can even create species-rich grassland under the scheme. As I was saying earlier, that's quite a tricky one to establish on more fertile ground, just due to the fact that the flowering species don't tend to do as well. They tend to get outcompeted by arable weeds if it's been in a crop for a few years before you sow it over to species-rich grassland. But for a mixed farm, there's a huge range of options, and for arable farms, you can pick and choose between the arable options. And now that the scoring is hopefully again the same this year, it needs to be less, then you don't need such a variety of options. You can pick and choose what you think will suit your farm and not overcomplicate it.
No. And throughout the country, but I know up in the northeast and there's areas down the east as well, they target, it's corn buntings that they target. And that's obviously a specific wild bird seed mix. If you go into a collaboration and they're looking for other things like the corn bunting mown grassland, which is quite late, but it's obviously it's quite a good payment rate. But it's targeting support for the corn buntings, basically, to help the corn bunting population. So there are kind of initiatives in different parts of the country, West Coast and such like, that are targeted for specific species.
Yeah, down in the southeast we don't have corn buntings here. I'm fairly sure they might be down in Berwickshire, certainly not in the Lothians, but Berwickshire and into Northumberland. I know there's corn buntings down that way, so it's interesting. It just shows, across the country the different options that are available to people. So there is an online section of the website where you put in your holding number, and it gives you the available options in your area based on your holding number. So that's quite a good tool to check what's available for you. Another thing to think about is if you've got a triple SI, a special site of scientific interest, worth speaking to Nature Scot, because if you want to manage the triple SI nowadays, they're doing fewer and fewer of their management agreements. They're encouraging applicants to go for the AECS scheme in order to fund any sort of management of the triple SI. So it's really important to speak to Nature Scot before you put any of those sort of sites into a scheme, because you need to make sure that they're happy with what you're going to put in. We've seen schemes thrown out where it's not been, quite the right option for the triple SI. So it's definitely worth, if you've got one of those, speaking to Nature Scot before applying, and if possible, get them out on site with you. They're wanting to get these schemes in as well. They want these sites managed correctly. So if you have got triple SI, contact the local office, see if someone will come out and go over it with you and see what options are available. But yeah, if you don't have triple SI, the targeting tool is the best thing to look at to see what's available. And other things to think about is the sort of landscape features as well, like hedgerows, small scale tree planting. They're quite good options. The capital items can be limited, depending on how much other capital items you're going to put in on your scheme, fencing and things. But, you could get up to 500 metres of hedge planting through an AECS scheme, which, could really transform some fields for people.
Yeah, and there's water quality items in there as well. So there's lots to look at. The starting point probably is a targeting tool. You've mentioned that. It's also fair to say that doing an AECS application, it's not a 5-minute job. If you're, I think the best advice is have a look at the targeting tool and also think what works for you. It's very easy to look at the pound signs and go to that, but if that's going to compromise your farming activities, and it's not really suitable options for your farm anyway, you've got to think about how you're farming. You have to live with the scheme to get the best, to work with it, but also to get the best, get that scheme to give it the best benefit, really. And once you've done your targeting tool, see what's available in your area. Start thinking of things like your rotation and stuff like that, because it needs a fair bit of planning.
Yeah, I think that's the one of the downsides to the scheme is the lengthy application process. It is doable yourself if you have the time and the know-how, but I think from most people, you're going to require some professional advice just to make sure that you're filling in everything correctly. So a lot of the grassland options, for example, you need a management plan drawn up for way to graze grassland, for example. And you can do it yourself. There's online templates and things, but it's just making sure that you've got all the supporting documents required, because they won't necessarily come back to you and ask for them if you've missed them off your application by the time you've submitted it. So it is a time-consuming process, and as you say, making sure that you've got options that suit your farm. There is obviously flexibility, so the likes of the wild bird seed or the retention of winter stubbles followed by green manure, when you're doing your application in 2026 to start in 2027, you're trying to think of your rotation 6 years' time. Where am I going to want that retention of winter stubbles? If you get 3 years into the scheme and you think, I don't want it in that field this year, you can write to your local office and ask them to move it. And as long as you're still meeting the full requirements of the scheme, that you say you had 10 hectares of retention winter stubble, you can move it to a different field as long as you write and ask their permission. That's generally okay. So some options are obviously permanent. You need to, if you're doing way to graze, it needs to be in the same field every year for the 5 years. But the rotational arable options, there is scope once you're in the scheme. If you find, actually, I can't fulfill that, I need to move it to a different field, you can do that. So there is a bit of flexibility.
I think even with consultants hat on, you learn things after folk have been in 5 years, what works, what doesn't work. Like one of the things I would also say about retained winter stubble, if you have got grassweed problems and things like that, sticking it in the same field for 5 years, particularly if you, dare I say it, you're fond of using you maybe need to use Roundup now and again to tidy up a field. You're not going to be able to do that with this. And that can lead to big build-ups of things like cooch and such like. You've really got to, pick your fields and use your rotation. Use it wisely.
The other thing you need to do before you sort of start the application is you need to do a farm environment assessment map as well. So that's quite tricky for people to do themselves. You need to prepare a map of the farm with all the habitats that are there and write a little bit of blurb about them all. So, if you've got a river, for example, you need to write some information. There's a table that accompanies the map. So that's probably a good starting point, along with thinking about your rotation, but it's just having a good look at what habitats are on your farm, using the targeting tool, create that farm environment assessment, and then start picking your options and going from there. But I think that the hardest thing at the moment is it is obviously a 5-year scheme. We're talking about going into 2027. Who knows what the global economy will look like at that point. It feels like sometimes a bit of a risk to go into a scheme. On the other hand, it's guaranteed income. You know what you're getting for those bits of land for the next 5 years, in addition to basic payment. And 5 years' time will take us beyond potentially basic payment. We might be onto a new subsidy scheme by then. So, knowing how much you're going to get for each scheme every year is maybe reassuring for people. So it's, there's two sides to it. It could be a risk to go into it because you think, oh gosh, well, something better might come along, but equally it's guaranteed income.
Yes, I think that's a key thing, but it comes. It's like everything else. Basically, plan and make sure you can live with that scheme for 5 years. Don't just follow the pound signs and put a great heap of the farming. If you think that's going to compromise the farming activities, if you're going to end up being short of grass, if you need barley and straw and things like that, you need to work, make it work for you, or else it's going to be a long 5 years. Pick, there's some of the habitats, you're creating habitats, chance to create habitats, try and put them in the right places as well. There are places that you wouldn't put, well, birdseed, as Mary Jane alluded to earlier. If a crop doesn't grow there, well, birdseed's probably not going to grow there. But there's certain places you wouldn't have put wild birdseed, perhaps next to trees or something like that.
Yeah, I think if it's shaded by trees and the crop doesn't grow, the wild bird seed probably isn't going to grow as well, because actually wild bird seed is almost trickier to establish than many crops because you're often sowing a mix of different seed types. So, trying to establish a mix of seeds with different, requirements, there might be tiny seeds, big seeds, versus, trying to sow spring barley or something, it can be even harder to establish wild bird seed, but it sits nicely alongside woodland in terms of it provides cover for the seed-eating birds that'll be flitting in and out of it. But other options like wader graze grassland don't sit next to woodland because often the predators will sit in the trees and swoop down on the little ground nesting birds and their chicks and their eggs. So there's actually a restriction on where you can put wader grassland. Yeah, so there's a 30-metre buffer next to any sort of woodland planting, but they've actually changed that this year to include sort of hedgerows as well. So you want to kind of allow for that if you've got wetland or wader graze grassland area, don't be going and planting a new hedge next to it as well. That's because that might potentially change the habitat. But there's lots of positives of the scheme. We went into an old SRDP scheme 15 years ago at home, and the hedges that we planted under that are absolutely tremendous now, and it's really transformed the landscape of our farm, providing shelter for stock, maintaining field boundaries, and obviously we need to cut them and things now, but it really has transformed the local landscape, and I think that's been a real visible difference for us. Many of the options you come out of after the 5 years, like we don't sow wild birdseed now anymore, now that we're not in the scheme, but the likes of the hedges, it's just a really nice long-term thing that's going to be there for generations to come, hopefully. Likewise for the small woodland planting that we did, these woods are maturing up nicely now, and it's nice to see them doing that, and we've enhanced the habitat of the farm because of it.
Yeah, I think it's also quite funny that there are some people that, it can be a time like this when things are maybe not so good and they are looking at something else for the sake, for the sake of the farm business, essentially. Once they've been in it a few years and things take shape, they get to quite like the scheme. and the benefits that it's bringing, not just necessarily financial or stability in terms of the business itself, but they'll tell you what, some of the birds that they're seeing, or, how the habitat's establishing and things like that, so that they actually quite like them on their farms. It's developing another side to their farm that, it's whether it's aesthetically or biodiversity point of view, it's really improving, the farm.
Yeah, I think most farmers will agree that they enjoy walking through the farms and seeing wildlife. So anything that's going to boost that. And, just talking earlier about the food processing grant as well, anyone with a diversified farm business where they're welcoming people onto the farm, the likes of the AECS scheme can really help enhance the environment. So say you've got glamping pods or holiday lets, think about where could we maybe put some nice habitats that are going to be, for guests to walk around, to enjoy, woodlands, hedges, field margins, floristically enhanced, but, species-rich grasslands. I've had clients that have planted species-rich grassland in front of, glamping pods, and it's just like a lovely meadow for guests to look out on. And that's, a positive impact to their business as well, because people are coming out to the farm and seeing the biodiversity and understanding just how much farming is doing for the environment. So that's another, it's not necessarily got a financial value to it. We can't prove that the guests are coming because it's got a nice habitat, but it's a bonus, isn't it?
Absolutely. Farmers, they get bad press sometimes that everything's sprayed everywhere and such like, but when they're creating habitats like this, they are aware of the new species and that, and during the actions they'll tell you, we're actually seeing this, and this has appeared, and or somebody's been in counting something on their farm, and they take great pride in it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth looking into the scheme for this year anyway. Anyone that's been thinking about it, maybe hasn't done it before, or anyone that's had the 5 years and it's up and they maybe haven't gone back in for a couple of years, maybe worth revisiting, because as I say, hopefully the scoring it's easier to get the points that you need, or the threshold will low again this year, hopefully. So it is more accessible to everybody to consider applying again.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Rural Roundup. We'll see you back here on the 20th of May with our next episode. This episode was hosted by George Chalmers and Mary Jane Lawrie, and was produced by George Goley and edited by Cameron Wall.
The Farm Advisory Service Podcast. Audio advice on livestock, crops and soils, environment, rural business, and more. Brought to you in association with the Scottish Government.